Okay, we're going to start exercise 8.5. Now let's read the question. It says, for each of the following one-step equations, so one step means it's only got really one step in it, draw a flowchart, use backtracking to find the value of n. So if you think about this equation, in the questions that we've done before, we used to have a box. So instead of drawing boxes, when you do your working out, just some lines will do. So instead of boxes, okay, so we used to have a box here, but instead of drawing boxes, I'm just going to draw a box on there for this one, but it gets a bit sort of tedious to draw all the boxes all the time. So let's have a look at this. If we're going to do this one, we start with n in that first box. And then what was the step that we did? We did our arrow and we did a +2. Okay, so in here we had an n plus 2. Then our final answer, if we follow this, is 18. So that's what, if we did backtracking before, this is what it would end up as. So now we're going to do backtracking. So there's our part 1. We draw our flow chart. So there's our flow chart. Okay, I probably could put equals on there. Okay, so we've got our flow chart. There's our flow chart. Now part 2, it says use backtracking to find the value of n. So we've got to go backwards. So I'm going to write 18 this way. Okay, so what was my opposite? My opposite was -2. Okay, so what's 18 minus 2? 18 minus 2 is 16, and that's what, I'm going to put my equals in there. So we get n equals 16. So this becomes my answer, n equals 16. So see how I've got the equals there? Put the equals there, so n equals 16. So that is my working out. So let's have a look at this one over here, part B. So it's n minus 3 equals 11. So I've written it down. I've drawn my lines. Okay, so I'm going to go n down. What was my next step? My next step was take 3. So I'm going to go take 3, right, n take 3 equals 11. Okay, so that was what my equals was. So now I'm going to do my backtracking. So I put my 11 underneath. What was my backtracking? I took 3 away. So what's the opposite to take 3? +3. So now I did take 3. Oops. I did take 3 there. Oops, I've got that line on there, doesn't matter. Take 3 there, so now it's a +3 here. Okay, so it was take 3 there, it was +3 here. So 11 plus 3 is 14. So what does that mean? It means n equals 14. So there's my answer, n equals 14. Okay? So now, let's have a look at this next one over here. 5n equals 35, so this is C. So I put my n down. Now I do my 5n. So what did I do to that? N. What does 5n mean? It means 5 lots of n, or 5 times n. So it was times 5 to get that 5n. And then I've got my equals, and then 35. So I put my 35 underneath. What was my backtracking? My backtracking was, if it was times 5, what's the opposite to times? Is divide by 5. So 35 divided by 5 is 7. So I put my n equals. So there we go. So my answer is n equals 7. Ooh, whoops. Move that whole thing. So n equals 7 here. Okay, now let's look at D. This looks a little bit different, but what do we know that the underneath means? That means divide. So let's think about this. So put my n down. Now my first step is divide by 2. So I put my n over 2. Remember, that just means divide by 2. It's another way. Remember, the divide sign looks like a fraction, so that's why we put it as a fraction. Okay, so it's n divided by 2. And then I put my equal sign, and my answer was 24. So now I'm going to put my 24 down here. What's my backtracking? My backtracking was a divide by 2 over here. What's the opposite of divide by 2? The opposite is times 2. Okay? Whoops. So 24 times 2 is 48. So my n equals 48. Okay? So you should be able to do those ones. Okay, let's look at question 2. It says, for each of the following, a 2-step equation. Draw a flow chart, use backtracking. So if we have a look at this one, 2n minus 1 equals 15. So 2-step means we've got an extra step. So instead of having 3 boxes or lines, we've got 4. So let's have a think. We did our n. What's our first step here? Our first step here is times 2. So let's do times 2. So that gives us our 2n. Then we've got another step here. That was take 1. So we've got to do take 1. So here's our flow chart. So now we've got 2n take 1. And what did that equal? That equaled 15. So now let's do our backtracking. So I'm going to write 15 underneath. Okay, so what was our first backtracking one? It was take 1, or sorry, yep, take 1. What's the opposite to take 1? Must be plus 1. So 15 plus 1, 16. Okay, so what was our next? It was times 2. So what's our opposite to times 2? Is divide by 2. So 16 divided by 2, or 16 how many 2's? Is 8. So now we get n equals 8. So there's our answer. Let's have a look at this one over here, part B. Looks a bit trickier, but we don't have to worry about it. It's easy. So let's have a look. We put our n down. What was our first step? Remember, underneath, that means divide. So it was a divide by 2. So that was our first step. Was divide by 2. Okay, so we write our n over 2, which means n divided by 2. Then we've got plus 7. So we do it plus 7. So we end up with n over 2 plus 7, sorry. And then that equaled our 16. So now when we do our backtracking, what do? I write my 16 underneath. So we had this part here, which was plus 7. Looks a bit dodgy there, but it's the wrong one. So I do my plus 7. Okay, so 16 plus 7. What's that? 16 plus 7? 7, 6, I can't even think. 23. Okay, so 23. Now this was, over here, was divide by 2. Sorry, I should have had that one. Divide by 2. So what's our opposite divide by 2? Is times 2. So 23 times 2 is 46. So we write n equals 46. So there is our answer. So if I do this one here, I've jumped down to E, okay, because it's got a brackets in it, because it looks a little bit different, but we don't have to worry too much about that. So let's put this down. Let's put our N. So let's have a think about that. Bracket meant that this was our first step, okay. So the bracket means, if you think about it, brackets first. So let's have a look in that bracket. So what have we done? We've done the plus 3. So our first step is plus 3. Okay, so I've got my n plus 3. Then, what did we do? Now it was times everything in the brackets by 7. So that was what that 7 outside the bracket means. 7 times all of this. So our next step was times 7. Okay, so now I get my 7 n plus 3 in brackets. And we know that, equaled 28. So now let's do my backtracking. So I've got my 28. What was the first step we did? It was the first backtracking step is opposite to times 7. So it has to be divide by 7. So 28 divided by 7 is 4. Now my next backtracking was plus 3. So when I do this, it has to be opposite to plus 3, has to be take 3. So 4 take 3 is 1. So n equals 1. There's my answer. So it looked trickier than what it was. Now let's have a look at this one here. We've got n over 2 divided by 5. So this is our top bit. So we'll look at that first. So we've got our n. So what was... Then we'll look at this part here. So our first step was n take 2. So we did a take 2. So we get n take 2. Then our next step was all of this, all of n take 2 divided by 5. Remember, underneath means divide by. So all of that divided by 5. So divide by 5. And so we put it underneath. So n take 2 over 5. And what did that equal? That equaled 1. So let's do our backtracking. So I'll put 1 there. What was the opposite to divide by 5? Opposite to divide by 5 is times 5. So 1 times 5. Rightio. So these ones here, the next question is a 3-step equation. So that means we have to add extra boxes. So let's have a look at this one. We'll just do it quickly. So I've got my n. What's my first step that I do with the n? This 2n means times 2. So I do my times 2. So I get 2n. What's the next step? Next step. Okay. So now everything divided by 4. So I do my divide by 4. So here we go. We've got my 2n plus 4, my first couple of steps, and then divide by 4. And I know all of that equals 9. So now I'll write my 9 down. Now I do my backtracking. So this was divide by 4. So what's my first thing? Is times by 4. 4 nines. What are 4 nines? 4 times 9? 36. I hope it's 36. Then what do I do next? I've got plus 4. Okay, so my plus 4 is going to be take 4. So 36 take 4 is going to be 32. Oops, what did I do? Divide by 4. Sorry, there was meant to be a take there. I wrote divide. Okay, so then I've got my 32. What's my next step? It's times 2. So it is a divide by 2. So 32 divided by 2 is 16. So n equals 16. I'll let you figure out all the rest, but it's following those steps. You all know what to do. It's just following a step at a time. Good luck.